Okay, everybody, thanks for your patience as we go ahead and get started. We are just about 2 minutes after the hour, so sorry for starting just a little bit late there, but we wanted to make sure that everything was all set up and ready to go. We're really excited to have you here today for this conversation, an introduction to elder abuse in partnership with the Department of Justice and with a special guest speaker from ElderServe, actually, a senior companion grantee who's doing some really interesting work. We'll talk more about this as we go, but this is just the first of three planned webinars in partnership with the Department of Justice on this really important topic of elder abuse. And as we go, we're going to look at different aspects of it and kind of tease it apart and give different grantees opportunities to share their work too. So it's a really exciting time here and a really exciting learning opportunity for all of us on, again, a critically important topic. Before we really dive into things, I do want to give one last opportunity to everyone to use the tools that you see on the screen right now to let us know where you're calling from. You can use the map right in the middle to let us know where you're calling from. Just use the zoom function to the top right of that map to zoom in on the United States, and then grab the little purple flag to the top left and drag and drop it to where you are joining from. I see we've got Cindy, I should say rather, and I think that's a Teresa, who are maybe joining from all the way up in the very upper northeast, down to a healthy contingent from Florida. I see Laurie and Sherry and Margaret, across to Kathy and Laura heading out west there. Of course, I don't have enough time to name everybody, but it's really great to see that really wide spread of programs here today. Of course, we know this is a challenge and an opportunity that we all have all across the country. You can also use the poll that you see down at the bottom of your screen to let us know what program you represent. We've got a really healthy mix of programs here today, and that's really exciting. Looks like about half RCP, a third FGP, and a quarter SCP, and that's pretty much in line with the size of our portfolios, more or less, in general. So it's fantastic to see everyone here uniting around this shared challenge, and again, this shared opportunity. So thank you very much for joining. We've got a couple of housekeeping notes before we really get started. And they'll be popping up on your screen in just 1 minute. All lines are on mute, and we'll keep them on mute for a webinar this side. That's generally how we make sure everybody has the best experience. But you can ask questions via the chat box at any time. I'd actually like to invite everyone, if you've been here before, you know how we often do this. Let's break the ice in that chat box by just saying your name, your program, and where you're joining from. I know we saw you all on the map before, but let's get a little bit more personal. Break the ice, get used to using that chat box, because that is how you'll be able to ask questions of our two wonderful guest speakers here today. So go ahead and do that right now. All right, great to see all those come in. Kimberly from Lexington, Kentucky. I see Kay from Illinois. I see Karen from New Jersey. I see Laura from Missoula. I see they're coming in fast and furious. I can hardly keep up. Sherry from New Haven. It's really great to see, again, the real spread of programs and participants here today. This call is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, you can disconnect at any time. And we'll make the recording and slides both available after the webinar. One final note, elder abuse is a difficult topic, and it requires us to face some unpleasant thoughts and realities frankly and transparently. As a result, we'll be talking about some sensitive subjects in this webinar, including the reality of sexual abuse. We want you to know that ahead of time. If you're not comfortable with that, particularly in this format, which is somewhat impersonal and a little bit difficult sometimes to talk about difficult subjects, we also want you to know that that's okay. You can come back and view the recording later or reach out to us and we can point you to some resources. That said, our conversation today really will be a hopeful one, and that's why I'm so excited about it, because we'll be talking about ways that we're all empowered to be part of the solution to this real problem. That's where we'll focus today, on what we can do to stop elder abuse. With that, I'd like to hand it over to our fearless leader here, the Director of Senior Corps, Debbie Cox-Roush. Debbie?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being on the call today. This is the start of a great partnership that Senior Corps has with the Department of Justice and a topic that it affects all of us, and that is elder abuse and how we're going to work in this space. So we're very thankful for the partnership with the DOJ, and as Brian said, this is the beginning of three webinars that we're going to have, but of a long-term relationship across the country as we work with them to address this problem. You know, every month 1 in 10 older adults worldwide experience some form of abuse. That's 1 in 10. But with only 1 in 24 cases of elder abuse reported, those figures are likely to be much, much higher. With an increasing aging population in the United States and beyond, this problem will increase. By 2050, the global population of people aged 60 and older is predicted will more than double, from 900 million in 2015 to 2 billion. Experts report that knowledge about elder abuse lags as much as 2 decades behind the fields of child abuse and domestic violence. Limited past research means limited data to guide practitioners, policymakers, and trainers. What we do know now, though, and it's alarming, is that elders who experience a form of abuse, even modest abuse, have a reported 300% higher risk of death. Even verbal abuse has been linked to seniors' physical health issues and well-being. Data shows an uptick in reporting of incidents. Elder abuse has emerged, and I'm sure Maria will tell you today, as an important social public health issue. But whatever the statistics for the U.S. and beyond, researchers agree, and I think we're all finding that it is an epidemic. Today we start the conversation. We start the partnership, and honored to be partnering with the Department of Justice Elder Abuse Initiative. This month, Senior Corps has chosen to concentrate on a much-needed conversation and will continue to do so over the course of this partnership. What is elder abuse? What are some of the warning signs? How do we prevent it? How do we work in this space? This webinar will serve as a beginning, and the discussion on this crucial epidemic about seniors will continue over time. We're really glad to have our partners on board today, and Brian, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and let's get talking about this subject.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for that introduction, Debbie. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker here, someone who's just an absolute expert in this space, and that's Maria Shumar, a victim specialist consultant. She's a specialist in the area of elder abuse prevention. She was a victim advocate for 22 years, serving in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Attorney's Office, where she worked on domestic violence, sexual assault, and all types of elder abuse cases, as well as at the Abused Persons Program in Montgomery County, Maryland. She served as a domestic violence shelter advocate there. She's been a member of the D.C. Office on Aging's Adult Abuse Prevention Committee since 1999 and currently serves as a board member of ElderServe, a shelter for abused seniors in Rockville, Maryland. In 2015, she was detailed to the White House Conference on Aging, where she began work with the DOJ Elder Justice Initiative. She retired in 2015 from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and now she's a consultant in the area of elder abuse in the area of elder abuse and victim advocacy for the Department of Justice's Elder Justice Initiative. She's going to take us through our first introduction to elder abuse here today. So with that, everyone, please join me in welcoming Maria.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. And I want to welcome you to the Get Involved, Get Safe series. We're going to talk today about a serious subject, and that is elder abuse. Elder abuse is a term which is used to describe an act that can cause physical, psychological, financial, sexual harm, or neglect to an older person. When you look at this slide and the statistics on it, on elder abuse, we can see that increased nursing home or hospital admittance occurs, premature death, and approximately 1 in 10 seniors is abused each year, but we know that number is low because people don't report it. And sadly, only 1 in 23 cases is ever reported to Adult Protective Services. So why should we care about elder abuse? Because all crime victims deserve respect, from the very young to the very old. We are seeing a rise in the older population in our country, and with an increase in this population comes an increased risk of them becoming victims of abuse. Many older victims have a disability of some type, and this makes them more vulnerable, and they are often chosen as targets by perpetrators. As we said before, elder abuse is underreported. Only 1 in 44 cases of financial abuse is reported, and only 1 in 23 has been reported to Adult Protective Services. And many professionals have not had training on elder abuse, and the public is generally ill-informed about it and unequipped to make a report. Elder abuse is often called the hidden problem, and the lack of awareness is widespread. There are societal attitudes that, just like it used to be with child abuse cases, that's it a family matter. We've seen this in child abuse and domestic violence cases. And experts say, as was said earlier, that we are actually 3 decades behind the field of child abuse and domestic violence. And also what we can say that ageism, which is stereotyping of older adults as infantile or senile or lacking capacity, contributes to a lack of support for older victims of crime. Elder abuse cases can fall through the cracks. They can get lost in the system, or they can get overlooked. Agencies may not be equipped to handle the elder abuse cases, and the entities involved in these cases may not be communicating with each other. In addition, older victims may be attached to the abuser if it's a family member or someone they love, and they may be afraid to report for fear of being re-victimized or put in a nursing home or institution. And they might be ashamed, and often more than one type of abuse is occurring at the same time. And due to physical limitations or disabilities, older adults are twice as likely to suffer injuries. For example, in domestic violence cases, someone who was young and was going through a domestic violence situation, they might have been able to bounce back after such a situation, but as an older adult, the beatings they get, they just can't bounce back from them. So what is elder abuse? There are 5 types: physical, psychological, financial, sexual, and neglect or abandonment. Let's go to physical abuse. Now, physical abuse of older adults is an act, rough treatment, or punishment that may result in pain, injury, impairment, or death. It can occur in many settings. It can occur in the home of the older adult, in a friend's home or family member's home. It can happen in an institution or a hospital setting. It can happen anywhere. It can start out as low-level abuse, like pushing or shoving, and increase to something as extreme as using a weapon. The abuse can result in anything from a bruise in low-level cases to death in extreme cases. And I actually had several homicides while I was working at the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. of older adults who died after abuse took place. Sometimes older adults who are physically abused may not recover from injuries and eventually die from them. Let's go on to the next one, which is psychological abuse. And over the years, having talked to many older adults who were crime victims, they tell me that the psychological abuse is the worst type of abuse and is often a precursor to physical abuse. Psychological abuse is verbal or emotional abuse that causes suffering, pain, or distress. And some examples are complaining about an older adult, blaming them for problems or bullying them. A mean or hostile look can constitute a threat and thus be considered nonverbal abuse. And preventing an older adult from going to worship services or isolating them by not allowing them to have phone calls or visits from friends or family is abuse. Treating an older adult as a child, not allowing them to speak for themselves when they're capable of doing so, can be a form of abuse. Calling an older adult names or just ignoring them or acting indifferent to their needs are also forms of abuse. And stalking an older adult by harassing them on the internet, in person, or by any other means is a form of abuse. And older people may feel they are all alone in this. They may feel ashamed or fear retaliation if they tell anyone about it. Next, we're going to talk about financial abuse. And this is the illegal or improper use of an older person's money or property. And a good example of this is an older adult asking their caregiver to make some purchases for them using their credit card. And then the caregiver uses the card to purchase personal items for themselves without the older adult's permission. Another real-life example occurred in Maryland several years ago, and any of you in this area may remember there was a case of a stranger taking several older adults to the bank to withdraw money. And luckily that bank had a camera and was actually able to identify the person, and they were prosecuted. Currently there are cases of calls from the IRS, from Treasury Department. Recently with all these disasters, there's been calls from fake calls from FEMA and other government entities. These are all scams to get money. It's important to be on the lookout for fake lottery scams and calls from overseas saying you have won the lottery but must pay money up front to get the winnings. Remember to tell these older adults you know, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And you can look at our Elder Justice Initiative financial exploitation page for more examples of types of abuse and where to go for help. So this is a tough one to talk about, sexual abuse of older adults. And it does happen. I had many, many cases of this over the years. So definition, sexual abuse is a sexual contact or non-contact of any kind with an older person without agreement from that person. Our slide gives examples of what sexual abuse can be. Sexual abuse of older adults is something people do not want to believe is happening, but it is. It happens in private homes, in group homes, nursing homes, and just about anywhere. Sexual abuse perpetrators aren't really interested in the sex act itself. It's all about control and domination. Examples of sexual abuse are unwanted sexual touching, forcing sexual intercourse or other sex acts. An example is a caregiver who bathes a vulnerable adult by roughly washing the genital area. That's abuse. An older adult who is diagnosed with an STD or HIV when they are not sexually active may be the victim of a sexual assault. And a person who is a victim of sexual abuse may not want to disclose information about what is happening. They're probably ashamed and afraid of retaliation. And sexual abuse does not always involve touching. It can be forcing an older adult to watch pornography, taking pornographic photos of them without their permission, and also speaking to them suggestively or in a sexual manner that's unwanted is a form of sexual abuse. And now we're going to talk about neglect and abandonment. And neglect is the intentional or unintentional failure or refusal to provide care or help to an older adult when the caregiver is required to do so. It's important for older adults, their friends and associates, to watch out for signs of neglect. An empty prescription bottle, an older adult who's lost a lot of weight, who has broken glasses, or whose dentures are missing, may be experiencing abuse. It's not always the case, but it might be. An example of intentional neglect is a caregiver who fails to provide for the basic needs of an older adult, like giving them food, medicine, clothing, providing healthy stimulation like conversation and social interactions. A caregiver who leaves or deserts or abandons an older adult at the bank, at the emergency room, at the mall or a park for hours is being neglectful. An older adult left alone who needs help is experiencing neglect. In some cases, family members or caregivers do not know how to properly care for someone who's bedridden. And we had cases like that at the U.S. Attorney's Office, which we, didn't always prosecute. But they may just not know how to lift a person properly, and there's help for that. This is unintentional neglect. The caregiver probably needs some training or respite help, and usually that's available through the Department of Aging. The Elder Justice Initiative has resources, and you can see our site or the Elder Care Locator for help on this. A person who suspects abuse or neglect should check it out and make a report to Adult Protective Services if necessary. Reporters can remain anonymous. Another option is to call the police to do a welfare check or to take a report of abuse. What are some of the warning signs of abuse? Some of the warning signs are listed here on our slide. These are just some of the signs of physical abuse. Unexplained bruises, repeated injuries that just, often are not, there's no good explanation for them, broken bones. Psychological abuse, if someone is crying or agitated, who normally would have been, outgoing or friendly, this is a sign. Financial abuse, noticing large bank withdrawals or seeing stacks of unpaid bills when you're visiting your older adults, or if you notice something's missing. For instance, that beautiful vase they always had on the shelf that was worth a lot of money, that might have been taken by someone to sell for their own benefit. Some warning signs of sexual abuse or genital or anal trauma, bleeding, STDs, bruising to breasts, and painful urination. Signs of neglect, dehydration, poor hygiene, poor living conditions. And abandonment would be just seeing a vulnerable older adult left alone in distress. So what are some of the causes of elder abuse? Well, there's really no one explanation for the cause of elder abuse. We know that ageism exists, and this is stereotyping of older adults as infantile, senile, or lacking in capacity. Societal attitudes that abuse is a family matter or that one should not get involved only perpetuates abuse. So ignoring the problem or pretending it doesn't exist will only increase elder abuse. So professionals and others need to educate themselves, like you're doing today, about elder abuse and spread the word. Awareness and education are the first steps in solving the problem. We have to remember that everyone ages differently. Old age does not equal Alzheimer's disease or a lack of cognitive ability, and older adults have the same rights as do all of our society. So get involved when you see ageism, stereotyping, or situations where abuse is likely. Complain or speak up to assert an older adult's right to respect. Try to prevent abuse before it happens. Some other causes of elder abuse? Well, unresolved conflicts within families can contribute to elder abuse. For example, sometimes, this is such a common theme, I mention it here, the problem child who isn't working ends up moving in and being the caretaker for the older adult. The caregiver may start to take control over what the older adult can and cannot do, who they can see and talk to, and they may isolate them and begin controlling the finances. The older adult may have guilt, blaming themselves for the adult child's issues. They may be conflicted about sharing what is happening. It's common that families who use violence to solve problems are at greater risk. Some family members may feel they are entitled to an older adult's inheritance and become controlling and abusive. Relationships where there is a history of domestic violence are at greater risk. And that's even as the parties continue to age. Unfortunately, for the abused older adult, they cannot bounce back from domestic violence as they did when they were younger. Also, settings where there is mental illness of either the caretaker or the older adult provide a greater chance of abuse. In addition, substance abuse opens the door to all types of abuse. This could be substance abuse either by the caregiver or the older adult themselves. Addiction and the need for drugs or alcohol is an incentive to steal or harm an older adult for money or property. And older adults with addictions may act out or become belligerent, increasing the chance for violent altercations. Gambling can also be a form of addiction and can lead to issues, whether the older adult is the gambler or the caregiver feeding their addiction by way of stealing funds. Ignoring abuse and pretending it's a family matter will only increase the odds of it happening. So keep your eyes open and watch out for these signs and get involved to prevent elder abuse. So this slide shows the perpetrators of elder abuse. And as we see, you think by what you read that it's home care aides, but no, it's actually family members that are the biggest group in the perpetrators here at 57.9%, and friends and neighbors at 16.9%, and home care aides at 14.9%. Some other types of abusers are new friends or new romances, such as those that are on the Facebook or the sweetheart scams. So be watchful for new friends who borrow money or need financial help from an older adult. We mentioned earlier that substance abuse, financial problems, mental health issues, and past criminal behavior are risk factors for abusers. So let's talk about preventing elder abuse. Older adults, their friends and family, and anyone involved with older adults should be watching out for each other, whether it be at the bank, when you visit a friend, or if you see an older adult who has a personality change, who is depressed or quiet when they were once happy and outgoing, something could be wrong. So do the following. Listen to older adults. Give them the time and the opportunity to speak up, and be respectful. Older adults have a lot to say if given the chance. And intervene when you suspect abuse. Check in with the older adult. When suspicious of abuse, you can call Adult Protective Services or the police. If the abuse is occurring in a nursing home, you can call the ombudsman, the police, or Adult Protective Services, or other relevant profession in that field. Welfare checks. You can ask the police to do a welfare check on an older adult you are concerned about. And watch for signs when you're at the bank, when you're visiting the pharmacy. Be watchful for changes in older adults, such as their personality, if they have strange bruises or marks that there's no real explanation for, empty medicine bottles or unpaid bills. These types of things are things to watch out for. And speak up if you see abuse or even potential abuse. So what are some tips for older adults? Older adults should remember to make sure all finances, such as bank, credit card, and medical statements, are accurate. They should keep connected to a support network of good friends and family. If there are questions or an older adult needs help, reach out to the organizations in the resource list provided at the end of the presentation. Or you can call a hotline or just reach out to trusted individuals like the police, doctor, or clergy. If an older adult doesn't want to file criminal charges against a family member or a friend, they can consider applying for a civil restraining order. This is usually done at court, and each state has their own procedures for applying for a restraining order. So they're different in every area. Other tips would to have a cell phone handy, or to wear one of those pendants so they can get help easily. And it's really, the most important thing really is to watch out for each other and get involved if you see abuse. So for all types of elder abuse, you can go to the Elder Justice Initiative website at www.elderjustice.gov. And the National Center for Victims of Crime is a great organization. They have a hotline called Victim Connect.
Hey, Maria, this is Brian. Sorry to jump in, but I'm wondering if maybe you stepped away from your phone a little bit. You actually got a little bit quieter there.
No, I'm right here.
Oh, great. No, you know what? I think that was on my end, but you are coming in loud and clear now.
Did you miss something?
No, but actually, since I've already so rudely butted in, and I'm sorry for that, I'm wondering if I could ask a couple quick questions that I think would be helpful.
Sure.
If we could go back one slide to your tips for older adults. as we know, we've got a lot of people on this call who work with people who work with older adults, so to speak, and I think these tips could be helpful, but I'm wondering if there are any tips you would add to this list for people who are sort of one step removed for older adults themselves. How could you prepare someone to pass along these tips or to work with older adults directly on this? And I know we could have a long conversation about this, but I'm wondering if you have, 2 or 3 sort of quick tips more for that kind of role.
Could you repeat that again? Like just for, I'm not
sure
what you're asking. Mm-hmm.
Sure. So if you were speaking to someone who's not an older adult themselves, but they work with older adults quite often, maybe they're a volunteer who, a Meals on Wheels volunteer. Let's take a very concrete example. What kinds of tips would you give them for their interactions with older adults?
Sure. Okay. Well, for instance, if it was someone like a Meals on Wheels, if you enter the home and you see that table with all kinds of junk mail on it just piled up, it might be beneficial to check in with the older adult and say, are you getting any lottery scam, or you probably don't want to say scams right off the bat, but have you won the lottery recently, or is anyone calling you about the lottery? Seeing that table full of junk mail is a big sign for someone when you enter the home. And then, take the steps. Actually, if there is financial abuse going on, we have a great resource on the Elder Justice Initiative website, which is the Elder Abuse Resource Roadmap, which will guide you through different types of financial abuse and where to find the help. So, I don't know.
Great. Yeah, that's very helpful, and I actually want to I see some people in the chat starting to offer some of their own ideas, and I'd encourage people to keep doing that. And also, please get some questions in the queue too as we start to talk about these resources. And in the name of one of the questions I've seen come through already, you mentioned contact the ombudsman, and I think Mary was just looking for a little bit more clarification about what that was. I see Shannon may have replied, but maybe if we can just get some confirmation, Maria. When you said the ombudsman, what specifically are you talking about?
Okay, an ombudsman is, they're located usually at the nursing homes or institutions like a nursing home, and they are the ones to report suspected abuse to in the nursing home. They're supposed to investigate it and try to resolve the issue. And a big organization for that you can reach out to in terms of finding an ombudsman is the National Consumer Voice. It may actually be on the slide. I'm not sure if I have it on the slide at the end here or not, but I think I do, yeah.
Okay. I see we're starting to get some more questions about where we can find different things, so sorry for the interruption again, but let's jump ahead and talk through some of those resources, and then we'll bring Shannon on for her perspective.
Okay. Just so you know, the Elder Abuse Resource Roadmap is located on the Elder Justice Initiative website in the Financial Exploitation section. So here we have, a very good resource is the National Center for Victims of Crime Victim Connect hotline. They have individuals that are trained specifically on elder abuse there to assist you, and older adults can call, or people who are seeking help for older adults can call to get resources in your area and get guidance. And for physical abuse, we have a hotline listed here, which is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And for psychological abuse, they can call the same hotline if they're in a domestic violence situation as the National Domestic Violence Hotline. But psychological abuse victims can call for local mental or psychological abuse counseling or therapy. Usually crisis centers or mental health programs in your area should have some counseling available. And Adult Protective Services may also investigate cases of psychological abuse, and you can take a look at the National Adult Protective Services Association website, which I have listed here, and you can see look at the map, which has all the states, and there's a phone number for each state that you can call if you want to reach out to them. And then for financial abuse resources, we have listed the Federal Trade Commission, which, has the do not call list, and they have a great section on identity theft and what to do if you're a victim of identity theft. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has is also a great resource for financial abuse. And those who are working with veterans, the Military Consumer Protection Day is a great website to check out. Our sexual assault resource, we have a hotline listed for the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. Yes, and we do have for neglect and abandonment and abuse in nursing homes, the National Consumer Voice website listed here. And for other neglect or abandonment, you really need to be calling Adult Protective Services. And you can call Adult Protective Services for nursing home abuse as well. Yeah, NCAL, I see someone mentions NCAL. Yes, NCAL is a great resource. The National Clearinghouse on abuse in later life, great resource as well. So here we have a happy picture at the end because we talked about a lot of really sad and upsetting stuff. And so I always like to point out this gentleman. You might wonder why he's smiling, and he's smiling because he took steps to try to address the issues of elder abuse in his life. So he's able to share his time with his grandkids and enjoy himself. So any other questions here?
I've seen some questions come in through our chat, but
yeah.
So one, and I know that there's been some conversation on this, but I'm wondering if maybe you want to address them briefly, and then we'll pass it over to Shannon. The first one that I saw was, what would you suggest if there's someone who maybe doesn't want help, or maybe won't admit even to themselves that there might be an issue there? How do you work with a potential victim of abuse in that situation?
Well, I think just even pulling up a website and talking and showing them, like say the Elder Justice Initiative website, we have on our site a series of stories of abuse, which I think are beneficial in educating not only professionals, but actually showing to older adults themselves, like, this is actually going on, and there's an entire website devoted to it. If they see that and maybe they take the time to read some of that stuff for themselves, maybe they'll slowly come out of their reluctance to actually, admit what's going on. And if you can find something on a specific type of abuse they're experiencing and show it to them, even better, because it'll, start to ring true, and maybe they'll, but it's difficult, especially when they're tied to someone, like in the romance scams or in the family member situations where, they just don't want to actually cut the tie. But working with them and being patient and just, pointing out to them, this is not just happening to you, this has happened to many people, and, see if that will help.
Okay, thanks for that. I do see we've got a few other questions in the queue, but I think it'd be really good to start to pull in some of that practical experience, and we can circle back to some of these questions later. And with that in mind, I want to introduce our second guest speaker for today, Shannon Gadd. Shannon is joining us from ElderServe, a nonprofit located in Louisville, Kentucky, that provides programs and services to promote wellness, overcome social isolation, protect seniors, and support independence. Their mission is to empower older adults to live independently and with dignity. The Senior Companion Program plays a critical role in that mission. In 2017, they had 63 companions serving 149 vulnerable older adults. Shannon shared this stat, which I just love. The rate of preventable hospitalizations for participants of this program for clients was 3%. Nationally, the national rate for seniors for preventable readmissions, that's 15%, 3% to 15%. That's a huge difference, and I think that program should be commended for that, and I think that's just a great statistic to share. The reason why we invited Shannon to join us on this call was because ElderServe is a program that specifically works with victims of elder abuse, crime victim services. They train senior companion volunteers at least annually on how to prevent, detect, and report elder abuse. They also provide information on identity theft, scams, and confidence schemes. Since this Crime Victim Services is co-located with their Senior Companion program, it makes it easy to support one another. And if it comes to their attention that any volunteer client has experienced abuse or exploitation, they can connect them to advocates who assist the victims in working through that experience. They've also consulted with the Department of Justice and the Administration on Aging. Shannon, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Thank you very much for joining us. We've got some conversation starter questions here, but maybe I'll start by actually just asking you if you have any reflections on what Maria just shared with all of us.
Wow. It's a lot to take in. I think especially if you haven't had any experience in the elder abuse area, I think really the most important thing is to understand that it exists and to tell other people about it, because it is, like Maria said, it's not reported. People don't recognize it, and that's one of the biggest problems. It's our biggest hurdle. Oops.
Yeah, thank you for that
Hello,
reflection.
me.
That's you. Shannon, I told you would be on there.
Yeah.
So everyone, this is Shannon. I saw someone checking the name. Yes, the name of the organization is ElderServe. Thanks for that question, Mary. So Shannon, to dig a little bit deeper into what you do, and I started off this conversation by talking about hope and talking about what we can do to prevent this, and we want to know what you're doing there in Kentucky. So we know that you've integrated Crime Victim Services into your senior companion work, in part because your organization offers both. But I'm sure that there's more to it than just that they happen to be next to each other. You happen to have shared staff. So can you talk a little bit more about why you chose to do that? Can we go deeper into why that particular combination makes sense for ElderServe?
Absolutely. As Maria shared, I think she said 1 in 23 cases of abuse actually get reported. And that's, first of all, often elder abuse doesn't come to the attention of the practitioners of ACS or law enforcement. And when it does come to the attention of somebody who can do something, it's often, it's too late. The money's been stolen, the bruises are already there, the consequences have already taken place. So the important thing is to get out there to people who are on the front line, and that is certainly the companions in the Senior Companion Program that we run. They are the front line, and the more we can educate them, the earlier they will be able to spot problems, and then we can actually prevent abuse before it happens or before it gets worse. So that to me is just so key, is that front line, because by the time I hear about something happening, it's too late. And the older adults that the senior companions work with are truly the most vulnerable. These are individuals who are we're trying to prevent from being hospitalized or institutionalized, so they are truly the most vulnerable. Another key thing for me is to dispel the myth that abuse only happens in nursing homes. Typically when we hear about abuse on the news, it's always the nursing home. And granted, abuse happens there, absolutely, but 96% of older adults live in the community. So the community is where the abuse is happening.
Great, thanks for sharing that perspective, and that's another really important statistic for us all to remember. So you talked about sort of equipping your volunteers, these frontline workers, to do this. Can you explain more what that means on a practical level? What does it look like to have these two programs working together on the ground?
Sure. Also, apologies if I sound funny, everybody. I'm still recovering from the flu, so I'll try to mute if I get ready to cough. Okay, so what does it look like on the ground? Training, as we already discussed, and we do it at least annually, sometimes more often. Annually, we'll do kind of what Maria did, really, an Elder Abuse 101, and then we might pick a topic and go dig a little bit deeper, like financial exploitation is a real hot button topic. So I actually did a presentation on that last month. And we give them lots of materials that they can take back with them, that they can read over or share with their clients. And really kind of like the deep work is the referrals. And by that I mean, a volunteer, a companion might report to a station supervisor that, hey, such and such is going on, I'm uncomfortable with that. And then the station supervisor will then contact one of our victim advocates, and they can dive a little deeper because they have the experience of, okay, is this just weird or is this bad? And we need to do something. One example is pretty recent. A companion had been with this client for years and knew about the family situation and all that. And this client's daughter suddenly moved in with her, and there was a lot of verbal abuse going on. It was not a healthy atmosphere, and the companion was able to identify that pretty quickly. And then our victim advocates worked with the client and actually ended up moving her out of the home because we couldn't get the daughter out. So moved her out of her own home, which is sad, but got her a new place to live, and she got to live out the rest of her days in some peace, which is nice. So yeah. It's being able to, once we hear about it, kind of differentiate, what's going on, dive deeper in there, and then do something and truly protect that person.
Thanks. And because you mentioned training, I did want to make sure we took some time to just go to the Elder Justice site, because I don't know if we've explicitly highlighted this before, and Maria, jump in, but they have a wealth of information here that is readily available to anyone who wants to use it, including the presentation we just saw, which you could pick up and use in your own community.
Yeah, Brian, thank you, because I really meant to say that. And the presentation I just did is available. You can see right there's a financial abuse one, but if you keep going down, you see the Stop Elder Abuse and Neglect, which is basically the presentation I just gave you. There were a couple extra slides that I included in the presentation this time, and we are in the process of upgrading it just a bit to change the language slightly and add some more colorful slides. But it's a great presentation, and there's a presenter's guide with, everything you need to say is right there, and a handout. And, I think, if your audience is interested in doing training with older adults, this is a perfect way to do it, or even with other professionals.
Thanks very much for that, Maria.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon, to pick it up where we left off, what kind of feedback are you getting on your elder justice work, on this integration? Do your volunteers appreciate it, your partners in the community?
Oh, absolutely. I think people are starting to understand that this is a problem area, but as we all know, we are all overburdened in the work that we do. So anybody that can come in and kind of pick up in that area and provide training or provide resources is always appreciated. And even for those people who've heard of elder abuse before, it's always good to have a refresher and a reminder. Reminders to me are really important because we are fighting against a culture of, well, that's not my business, that's not my problem. And so repeatedly reminding people that indeed it is your business and it is your problem is good. People sometimes just kind of brush things off where they really should not brush them off at all. And it also kind of depends on what your state is doing. I know in our area, Adult Protective Services is limited to vulnerable adults. It's defined by statute, and of course, not all seniors are automatically vulnerable. So there are plenty of, exactly. Mm-hmm. There are plenty of older adults who need help but don't meet that APS criteria. So there's that huge gap there. And we, of course, work with them because we are not limited only to vulnerable adults. And we also partner with police. The police have their job that they do, and they can't do a lot of the other, I guess, hand-holding, social service type work that we do. We transport people to court. We can take them to their bank and get, their checking account changed, or, we can really spend that time and walk through the process with them. And the police just, they can't do that. They don't have the resources to do that. We also partner with the court, and we do in-home protective orders. So there's, a segment of the population who's being abused, and they can't physically go to the courthouse to file for a protective order. So we work with the court and go into the homes of those people and do that over the
That's
phone.
fantastic.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, and that's such a key population that's being, ignored, and they definitely need the protection. So, it's all about the resources are getting fewer and fewer, and the need is getting greater and greater. So anytime we can make those connections, I think it's a really good thing.
Okay, so I'm going to first put in a plug for other questions. I know we've got a couple unanswered, and we'll throw them back to our panelists in just a minute. But as we get to the last few minutes of the webinar here, if you have a question, make sure you put it in that webinar Q&A box. But Shannon, I want to pick up on a thread that you just mentioned, and maybe Maria, you want to weigh in on this too. You just talked about adult protective services. You just talked about working with police departments, or we could expand that to other law enforcement agencies. We're actually going to have a whole webinar on that. This is also my chance to plug 2 upcoming webinars that we've got, one of which will focus just on building those resources. So Senior Corps community, stay tuned for that announcement. But I'm wondering if we've got a 2 to 3 minute version of advice on how to build those relationships to someone who's new to this space. It can be a little bit intimidating, I think, to add another acronym to the acronym soup that we all deal with locally. So how do I start to build these relationships if I don't already know my local law enforcement agencies or adult protective services?
Yeah, that's a loaded, very long question.
You've got 2 minutes. Go.
I'll just give you, from my experience in our area. I think every area is going to be a little different, but my experience has been that APS and the police are typically, how do I say it, can be very defensive. If you come in and say, hey, I'm this community-based person, what are you doing about elder abuse or whatever, if you have a specific case you want to talk to them about, they can be very like, whoa, why are you here? Why are you asking me this? What are you going to do? Is this going to be on the news? So my approach is always, just to be, you are there to be helpful. You're there to make their life easier. You're not there to judge them. APS especially, we all know that they are way overworked and way underfunded. I am not here to make any judgment on what you're doing. I'm here to help. I can be a resource for you. So that's kind of my experience, I guess. Maria, do you have?
Yeah.
Am I totally off there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, being part of the DC Office on Aging, they have a group that I still belong to after all these years. We formed really great relationships on those teams. And luckily for me, working in a prosecutor's office, I mean, the police kind of came to me. But once you got to know them and form those relationships, sensitizing them to the, in your own way, to elder abuse issues, and just touching their heart, because those guys really want to do, and girls too, want to do a good job. But just like adult protective services workers, anybody who's doing direct service work, they are tired, they're probably burnt out. But supporting them as much as possible, making their jobs easier, always helps.
Yeah, and once you get in that door and you're working with them, it becomes absolutely a lot easier. We all have all of the detectives' cell phone numbers, so once you get in that door and they see that you're not a threat, I think it's all good.
This is Debbie again, and part of our partnership with the Department of Justice, the department now has 92 elder abuse, elder justice coordinators across the United States. We have shared the state director's contact information with the Department of Justice, and so you're going to see a collaboration on a local level. I know it's already started in a couple states where that contact's been made, so that will be an extra resource to you all as your state offices as they work closely with the elder justice coordinators and as we move forward there. So I just wanted to share that information with you. And as this partnership grows, Maria, you can jump in here anytime, we will share information with you as far as contacts and educational opportunities. And of course, Brian talked about the webinars, but this is a growing partnership and we're going to provide every resource that we can.
Well, that's wonderful. That's great
awesome
news.
Okay. I want to pick up one question that I saw from the webinar, and I'm going to take a little bit of liberty and extend it a little bit. Christine asked about experience with religious elder abuse, or particularly with elder abuse where the practitioner is in a religious order. But I actually want to expand that out a little bit, because we talked about how most often it's actually the family, just statistically, right? We said it was, I think, Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, about 57%
Right.
coming from within the family, or at least trusted people. And I know from my experience in other walks of life that abuse of any kind, even not even just talking about elder abuse, often comes from trusted people or trusted institutions, right? So we can think about a religious order as a trusted institution. And it's really hard to have those conversations. So I'm wondering if either of you have any insight on to how to start to have a conversation with someone about what may be a situation of abuse when you suspect it's coming from someone or something or some institution they really trust. That's not a simple thing. Do you have any insight on that?
I personally haven't had, that's one of the few I have not had, where it was someone, a religious person or clergy abuse. But that is a sensitive subject. But I think you'd approach it just like you would with any trusted individual. You don't seem like you're not wanting to go to services anymore, or you seem to be uncomfortable around so-and-so, is everything okay? Just try to approach it with sensitivity and see how they react. You'll probably get to know it from their body language right off the bat, but yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any. I know we've had financial exploitation by preachers or reverends. We've had those before. So I guess as far as the religious aspect, that just it depends. It's totally situational. But of course, that's going to have a lot of layers there. So Christine, I'm happy to talk with you offline deeper about that. But as Maria said, I think just opening the door and opening that conversation with whatever way that you can think of that's not, again, kind of like with the APS. You're not there to judge them. Hey, like all the questions that Maria said would be great, door openers, and then just listen. You don't do the talking, just listen to them, and that will kind of help you navigate which way to go. And if they know that you're a trusted person as well, just putting that little, that little niggle in the back of their brain will help, and you might need to keep kind of chipping away at it. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, Shannon, and I agree. I think listening, of all the things you can do to help older adults, listening is the most important thing. I think sometimes we don't want to, we get uncomfortable with that silence, and you want to fill it up with your own voice sometimes, but the best thing to do is just to listen to them, and even if it's quiet for a while, they're thinking about what they're going to say to you. They're taking their time to process what you're asking them, and so just, let that silence be there until they say something, and sometimes that's hard to do, but I think it's one of the best things you can do.
Yes, Maria, yes, silence. Silence is your friend. I do that to my husband all the time, where I'll be totally silent, and then he'll just keep jibber-jabbering, and he'll say, oh, gosh, you're doing it again, aren't you? I'm like, yup. Silence is your friend, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe taking a cue from that, we are just about out of time here, but I want to invite both of you to see if you have any final thoughts before we sign off here today.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Oh, I was just going to say, what Maria shared and what was shown on the screen about all those resources, you don't have to reinvent the wheel to tackle elder abuse. There are lots of resources out there. Just go out there to the Elder Justice Initiative website and look around, contact me, and I'm going to give Brian some of the materials that we use. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just get the information out there, and the more people that know about it, the better we will be at tackling it.
Thanks, Shannon. Maria?
My final words are just get involved, just like the presentation says. Get involved, do something about it if you see it, check it out if you suspect it, and remember, you can make a call and be anonymous. You don't have to Adult Protective Services. You don't have to give your name. yes, get involved.
Okay, well, thanks to you both for that, and thanks to everybody for joining here today. Debbie actually had to run out to another meeting, but she offers her sincere thanks as well. I can't tell you how grateful we are to both of you for coming and sharing your expertise, and of course to all of you out there in the audience for the work that I know many of you are already doing in this space, and for your interest in continuing to support these efforts to protect older Americans all across the country. It really is moving, to be honest with you, from where I am. So we'll be signing off now, but thank you once again to everybody. We hope you have a great afternoon. You will see a one-question satisfaction survey pop up on the screen. Please do fill it out because it lets us know how we're doing. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll be signing off.
Thank you.